Hello and welcome to the channel where we've got a new Aston Martin Vantage plus two of its key rivals, one of which is the Ferrari Roma, the other one is the Porsche 911 Turbo S. Stay tuned.
The new Aston Martin Vantage is the most powerful car here with 656 horsepower from its Mercedes 4-litre V8. But from £165,000 it's also the cheapest. Doesn't look it though, does it? We've just road tested this car. To find out its full performance figures you can subscribe to the mag, including the full 129-year Autocar archive, over at themagazineshop.com/autocar, and I recommend it to you.
So let's start in the Aston because that is after all the reason we're here. I'm sitting inside an interior that is so much nicer than Astons that have come before. The material quality is terrific, it's beautifully put together. See this door, I did notice this on the launch actually, there is just one bit on the door, it's just not quite as solid as it might be in feel, but by and large it is really lovely. I absolutely adore these little rotary dials here that do the temperature and the fan speed and the radio volume, and the quality of all of this switchgear is really, it's just, you know, passes the tap test with flying colours. I'm sitting quite a long way inboard, or so it feels. Anyway, I can't really see any of the bonnet, and I think even if you were sitting right up on the roof, you can't necessarily see the left-hand edge. So this feels actually a slightly bigger car than I think it is. Only two seats in here, of course, but both occupants get plenty of room. There's a decent boot out the back, and the layout of this car is evident when you're sitting in it. It feels like the engine is slung out the front, it feels like it's rear-wheel drive because it just has that kind of demeanour. Got a very nice low-slung driving position. Let's deal with the steering first. It's quite heavily weighted to the centre. It picks up torque quite quickly as you turn off centre. And it doesn't dart left and right, it's quite stable. The ride is pretty good. Aston Martin used to be run by a bloke called Tobias Moers, who was formerly the chief exec of AMG, Mercedes. Now, Mercedes AMGs do have a certain feel, don't they? They've got quite a lot of noise, quite a lot of engagement and emotion, I suppose, and a bit of a hot roddy, hard feel to the ride. My understanding is that in the early stages of this car, that was kind of what he was going for with it. He is no longer there. And with his departure, Aston took the opportunity to kind of, not slacken off, but to kind of soften up this car a little bit, make it a bit less brittle, make it ride a bit more freely and a bit better on British roads, which are notoriously bad. Whereas if you develop a car in Germany and you bring it to the UK, you can be sort of quite surprised by how much vertical movement and brittleness there is in a chassis. This car now breathes a bit more easily, but it is still, I think, at the firmer end of things. The steering weights up very quickly. It's kind of got this on-centre natural feel to it where it sits, so it would sit very stably. And then as soon as you start moving off, the sort of torque build-up, the weight build-up in the steering comes very, very quickly. Because this is a car that is it's a sports car, it's a GT car, and it kind of wants to do both. So it's quite muscular. It's quite brawny in terms of its engine note and response. I'm going to have to slow right down to get anything out of it. How nice does that sound? It's a really engaging, enjoyable car. Could it have more deftness to it? Yes, maybe it could. But I enjoy it a lot. I have driven it on circuit. We're not driving it on circuit today, so that will limit the amount of opportunity there is to get up this engine, because well, that's 20 miles an hour and that's 60 miles an hour, so all these cars are incredibly quick. But I have driven one of these on circuit. It's good fun. You have to sort of keep the nose planted on the way in to help it turn, and then when you get back on the power on the way out, it almost helps to be a gear higher than you'd think and really sort of ride out on that mid-range of torque, because this car has got a boosty is the wrong word, but it comes in early and it just keeps going all the way through to its sort of 7,000 RPM red line, and it kind of does its best sounding work through that midpoint. And if you're right at the top of the rev range, sort of snatching gears, it doesn't respond, I don't think, as naturally in feel as it does if you just sort of surf out on this big crest of mid-range torque that it has. And driven like that, actually on road or track, there's a really nice, natural, easygoing flow and balance to it, backed up with this kind of brawny oomph that it has behind it. More so, I think, than, say, you found in like the DB9 or the sort of more recent Vanquishes. There's something a bit more shouty about it, which is fine. I like this car a great deal, an awful lot. It probably just wants the context of the other two, so I'm really glad we've got them on the same road. The context of the other two to see exactly where it sits in this class.
The £185,000 Ferrari Roma has been our standout car in this class since its launch, not only because of its elegance, but also because of its lovely blend of GT-ish sporting abilities. It also has a high-revving 3.9-litre V8 that makes in excess of 600 horsepower. Mad to think, but that makes it the least powerful car here.
And so to the inside of the Ferrari Roma. Now, something to explain just for a moment. Manufacturers prefer it if we borrow a car from them directly, because it means that, as they say, they can prep it properly, they can make sure the wheels are round and pointing in the right direction, make sure it's serviced in the right way, that it's running as it should do to give a representative sample of the car. I understand that. That is fine by us. It makes life much easier. However, Ferrari were unable to provide a Roma because they don't have a demonstrator for this car at the moment, so they couldn't give us one, which gives the choice: do we really want it in the test that we will find one from somewhere else? We decided we did. It was more important to have it here than it was to not have it here, so we have borrowed one from elsewhere. It is in good condition. It is quite new. It had done 700 miles before the current owner bought it, so it has been looked at before he bought it, it's been looked at after he bought it, the tyres are good. It's in as representative a condition as I think we can make it. And also, we are not track testing this car, so there's no performance figures to take from it or anything like that. In fact, I don't think we've ever track tested, performance tested a Roma. Of the three, I think this is the only one I've never driven on circuit. I did drive Ferrari's own Roma at the start of the year. Loved it a great deal against it was in a video with an Aston DB12 and a Maserati Gran Turismo, and I preferred this. Actually, some of my colleagues preferred the Aston, but I thought this was ace. And I still do think this car is ace. It is, well, as explained, it feels a bit more wieldy for a start than the Aston. I don't know if it's the fact that visibility is a bit better, it's a bit airier, but it feels somehow more compact. Drive position is good, ergonomics are okay. It's not perfect, but you'd overlook it in a car like this. It's not like it's an everyday hatchback, so I'll forgive some foibles in the way that the screens behave, things like that. Drive position's good. You get a small steering wheel, best paddles in the business, as I say every time I get in one. It's a really nice driving environment. I also happen to think it's a stunningly good looking car and subtle, especially in this colour. It's really nice. It's less bombastic than the Aston. It's got this higher revving, so it revs to 7,500, 8,000. Higher revving V8 than the Aston. It's not so in your face, and it immediately, I can see the tops of the wings, which might help. And also the torque build up from the steering is not so abrupt. It's sort of medium weighted all the time. It is a very responsive steering rack, but it doesn't sort of sit suddenly on straight ahead and then have a big build up of steering torque as you turn. It's quite wieldy, quite agile. It feels a more agile car even at normal road speeds than the Aston Martin does. These paddles are really good, and the gear shift is really responsive. It's so quick and responsive. It's just such a real joy. Yeah, there's less sort of anger from the exhaust, but it does make a noise when you get up it. Let's just try it. Again, we'll be in exactly the same position as in the Aston. I'll slow down to sort of 20 miles an hour in second gear, and it won't be very long before you're out of speed limit, basically. So they're all incredibly quick, but it just has a really lovely gait to the way it goes down the road. And of course there is, I love this button, the bumpy road button, which puts the dampers in their soft mode. Ferraris ride well, and this one is no exception really. It's just, you put it in bumpy road and it just starts to absorb little ripples and things like that, as if they're not there, but it, over long distances, for a car that is as agile and lithe and responsive as this, click that bumpy road button, put the if you put the drivetrain into an automatic mode and just sit back and chill, it's an incredibly relaxing car, I think, to drive long distance, even though the seats are quite small and figure hugging and not pillowy. It's not like you climb into a big Audi or something like that, you know, you don't just sort of sit in these huge seats, but I find they stay pretty comfortable over distance. Wind noise is limited, there is some road noise, but these are sports cars. I think that's okay. Ultimately, I find myself with this car in a similar position to how I felt about the DB12. I really like the Vantage. I really like the Vantage. It is a super thing. And I think they've probably got closer to nailing what they wanted that car to be than they did with the DB12. Now, I think if you are maybe scoring those cars as a percentage of how well they've achieved the job that the manufacturer set them to do, maybe the DB12 is like a 92% success rate, and the Vantage feels like 94, 95, but this Ferrari feels like 96, 97, something like that. Do you know what I mean? We're talking those small percentages of how well they do their job. I think this Ferrari is just such a good car. Such a good car. What would you improve? Maybe you'd have some of the engine note from the Aston coming through, but if you were making a dream lineup of taking certain aspects of which one and putting them together, I think the Aston's an astonishingly good looking car as well. And there are aspects of its interior which I like, and I really love its engine note. But I think the Ferrari broadly has other things covered. But let's see about the 911. Tradition would say it is the cold one, it's the clinical one, it's the everyday one, but feels less special. But let's find out.
The Porsche 911 Turbo S does things willfully differently. Its 6-cylinder engine is at the back, of course, and its 641 horsepower drives through all four wheels and not just the rears. Those traits give it amazing traction and its astonishing 2.7 second 0 to 62 mile an hour time, which we know it will do repeatedly without complaint.
And so to the Porsche. Well, it is a very effective business-like cabin with rather good visibility pretty much all around, but they build them in large numbers, so actually the more you build, the easier it is to justify really tight tolerances, because you can just automate more things. So this feels in a way like the most mass market car, but the way the car industry works in terms of fit and finish and everything else, it's none the worse for it. And also, whoever spec'd this at Porsche GB, bravo. It is gorgeous. I love this colour and trim, and actually the exterior colour combo as well. It's a really nice feeling interior. Driving position is, as you might expect, brilliant. Steering wheel's round, ergonomics generally sound. Pop it into manual mode, shall we? Right, we've done this with the other cars too, so let's do it with the Porsche as well. Turbo S's make all the power. It's a very smooth engine. Slow down to about 20 in second and see how long it takes. There's a little boost. Well, that didn't take very long, did it, to reach the legal limit? There was a bit of lag at low revs because it's a heavily blown engine. But for the most part, if you just keep it, actually there is a little sort of extra green band, really nice colours on this interior. The sort of above 2.5, you get a little bit of extra greenness. Through that mid-range, sort of third and fourth, I mean it's too quick for the road like they all are, but it's just responsive and smooth and slick, and it steers with a real consistency. It's just probably the most natural feeling steering setup of them all. Maybe the slowest is about 2.5 turns locked on. The Ferrari is more like 2. but it doesn't feel less agile for it. You know, it's this kind of blend that there is a stability around straight ahead, but the torque build up off is quite gradual, but quite natural at the same time, natural in feel. It's, along with brake pedal feel, general ergonomics, it's that really sort of efficient, effective, just no nonsense kind of approach. It is bombastically fast. You will not, I mean, you won't get to the limits of any of them on the road, but I suspect you get to the limits of this one last if you really tried. Also because it's four-wheel drive, which means in any conditions it finds traction. Four-wheel drive doesn't give you extra grip necessarily, but it does give you extra traction. And this has just got, it's just got performance to spare, and it feels like it's got performance to spare all the time. And yeah, there is no doubt, I think, that it is the least dramatic feeling of the cars here. If you want a dramatic 911, they will do you one. It's a GT3 or an ST or a GT3 RS. The Turbo is not that sort of car. This is not a heavy on drama car. It is a superb sports car that also happens to have supercar performance. But it doesn't shout, it's not angry, it's not in your face. And I suspect you could drive it round and most people won't realise it's a Turbo S at all. And there are enough 911s around, depending on where you live. People just kind of fade into the background a bit. But I have driven one of these on circuit, and oh my goodness, they are sensational. And actually there are times when you would think, no, this is not an undramatic car if you try one on circuit, because they do move around. Would you pick one over the other two? That is the question. The Turbo S is a sensational car. It nails what Porsche wants it to be. It's got traction to spare. It's unbelievably fast. You can mess around with it on a track and it just won't fade. You know, it is a sensational piece of kit. Is it as emotional? Is it as bombastic as the Roma and the Aston respectively? No. So, and actually that's the interesting things about these tests. You know, which is the best? Well, which one do you want? What do you want it to do? They all do a great job. I think if you were looking at which is the best on a strictly objective, how well do they set out how well do they achieve all of the criteria they set out to do, I think the Roma and this are probably neck and neck ahead of the Aston by a tiny fraction. But if I had all three outside my house every day for a year, I'd get in the Aston a lot. And then I would get in the Roma maybe a bit more, and I'd probably get in the Porsche every time I wanted to get places drama-free, fuss-free, but still have a good time. I'd probably end up using them all a similar amount. Pick a winner. It's probably the Ferrari, but honestly, it could be any of them.
I'm delighted to say that our other testers on this job thought the same thing as I did and placed the Roma in first place. It is the narrowest of wins though, and honestly, I love them all. For the full verdict, do visit themagazineshop.com/autocar. You can also find the Autocar podcast online. Know that we're here on YouTube at least every week. Visit the Autocar website at autocar.co.uk or buy the mag on the newsstands, as you've been able to every week since 1895.